For those of you up front, you're wondering, this is the oldest living millennial expert you've ever seen. You're right, your eyes are fine. You don't need to see your ophthalmologist. I'm going to take a couple minutes now and try to just debunk some of the myths you've heard. Perhaps you've heard all millennials are broke, unemployed, living in their parents' basements, among a collection of participation trophies they've never earned. Has anyone heard this narrative of millennials? All right, well, it's not going to be terribly helpful to take 82 million people and mislabel them in terms of growing your business. So let's just start with the fact that they're not all broke. In fact, there are roughly 10 million millennials who make over $100,000 a year. They live in urban markets, and I'm sure you would have guessed more than 50% of them are women. That's right, women. And the fastest growing group of people making $250,000 or more in the United States are millennials over the age of 30. If you're interested in the hard data and the facts, there's a report on this. It's at Millennial Marketing, and it's free to download later on. I'm not going to spend more time going over this other than to suggest there's an awful lot of stuff that comes out about millennials that's about the exact opposite of reality. So how many of you got a dose of Maslow in your past, right? See a few of your hands going up, right? The bottom of the pyramid had to do with sort of physiological needs, and the top of the pyramid, self-actualization. Maslow did not see millennials coming. Okay? And if you took away Wi-Fi, mobile, or Amazon for that matter, there'd be all-out panic, right? Millennials absolutely are hyper-connected. They are carrying a modern-day Swiss Army knife. Please don't consider it a phone. They have no intention of calling you back. All right, so it's Monday morning after a nice weekend in Florida. How many love experts do I have in the room? How about dating experts? Anyone a dating expert, perhaps? Okay, a few hands. All right, I'm a little concerned. Okay, so the most loved brands on the planet also generate the most profits. So the way love works is like this. I start a new relationship with a brand over here, and if it goes well, I'll buy again, and again, and again, and again, and again, until I get bored. And if I get bored, I can switch. And it's very easy to switch, right? I can go across the street and find an alternative to anything I want, whether we're talking about financial service products or electronic products. Same is true online. So in a world where it's really easy to switch, and I start with a new relationship and it goes like this, and ultimately I don't have to file divorce papers to not buy from you, right? I just switch. I have to think about how I create love. So I'd like to talk about that for a minute, because in every category, the most loved brands tend to be the most profitable over time. So most brands, and particularly retail brands, start with understanding these two factors. What is my brand awareness, and what is my overall satisfaction? Overall satisfaction is very highly correlated to the term Net Promoter Score, which suggests that your current users are influencing other users, and certainly true with millennial buyers. So yes, you need awareness and overall satisfaction to win, but it's not sufficient. Today's modern consumer demands more. There are three ingredients to love: uniqueness, innovation, and meaningfulness. The more unique you are in your service experience or the products that you offer, or both, the more pricing authority you have. The more unique you are, the more pricing authority you have. The less unique you are, the less pricing authority you have. If you're interested in this particular topic, I'd point you to Young Mi Moon, distinguished professor at Harvard Business School, and take a look at some of the work she's already published on the topic of being unique. The second ingredient, innovation. Today's modern consumer demands innovation. In fact, I'm going to take you through some research where they actually spend their money in favor of brands that they deem innovative. And by the way, millennial mindset employees prefer brands that create entrepreneurial opportunities inside the company. So think about innovation both as a consumer need state as well as an employee need state. And then finally, meaningfulness, which is to suggest in a world, if the product is the same, the price is the same, access is the same, I will prefer brands that align to my personal values, and that sense of purpose and meaning matter. So the third ingredient, meaningfulness, is a proxy for sales volume potential. So we have the first ingredient, uniqueness, proxy for pricing authority. Second ingredient, innovation, the glue that modern consumers expect. And the third ingredient, meaningfulness, a proxy for sales volume potential. And if you look at the high-performing brands, they will tend to score well on consumer data on all of those three measures. If they're weak in one particular area, it will limit their financial opportunity. All right? So now I have a whole group of love experts. Next time I ask, you can raise your hand comfortably. All right. So earlier, last year, we set out to understand this. I work for FutureCast, my parent company, Barclay, and the Cambridge Group, a consulting firm. We formed a partnership expressly to understand the financial impact of millennial influence across generations. So we studied consumers of all ages, up to age 65. I didn't misstate that, yes, all ages. We looked at 3,000 US consumers, 18 to 65, so millennials, Xers, and boomers, and we looked at the difference between derived and stated importance. So, stated importance, I intended to eat healthy this morning. Did I eat healthy? No. I intended to go to the gym this morning, just like many of you. Did I go to the gym? No. No, the reality is my stated importance matters, but derived importance, how I spend my time and money. So we literally did calculus to separate how consumers spend their time and money and what consumers say, and we looked at both, because both matter, right? What I intend to do and what I actually do diverge. And since we collected the data, we own the data set. We didn't do this for one client where they owned all the data. We reached an agreement to keep all this data, and we collected data on all kinds of different brands, including Amazon, Uber, and the brands you see here, as well as many others. So I'm going to tell you a couple of interesting things. First, 55% of the brand's performance on average, and it varied by category, so more important in electronics, a little less important in financial services. 55% was related to pricing, access, and physical kinds of measures. So if you were in a grocery store, your shelf position, if you're at eye level, is more important than shelf position being down here. That's kind of obvious. 55% of the financial performance, though, is related to pricing, shelf position, and sort of physical kinds of matters. If you were in retailing, same kind of thing. Ability to have access. So 45% was related to the 6 mindsets I'm going to take you through, which is to suggest if you want to maximize your financial performance, you're going to have to figure out which of those 6 mindset matters most to your customers and deliver value on those mindsets. So the 6 mindsets start with social circle all the way to accessible, and they are in order of importance. So overall, not to your brand specifically, not to your category specifically, but overall, number 1 was social circle and number 6 was accessible. However, it wasn't about which quadrant you're in per se, as much as dominating that area. So you can find a winner in every single area. It's about being dominant in that area and delivering value to that consumer group. So I didn't misstate it. I said social circle. I didn't say social media. There is a difference. Social circle is that you're part of the conversation. Your brand is actually participating in what I'll call consumer culture, right? So I live in Leawood, Kansas. I'm very depressed after last night's football game. I saw a woman with a Steelers shirt. I'm sure she's quite happy. And the reality is I'm at a cocktail party. I'm in Leawood, Kansas at a cocktail party on a Saturday night a few weeks back, and they're talking about a grocery store. Now, I don't know about you, but I find it kind of odd that people are having a conversation about a grocery store that doesn't exist at a cocktail party. But that's because Trader Joe's was in the process of doing a grand opening, and it was just a couple miles down the street. So Trader Joe's has a very strong social circle, just like Etsy, which is another marketplace company, and Tinder and Pinterest. I have a daughter who works at Pinterest. Pinterest has an amazing social circle among women, particularly women who are older than millennials, right? Very strong social circle. If I had a daughter who worked at Tinder, I wouldn't be talking about that right now. And if you're on Tinder right now, it's fine, but if I ask you to raise your hand, don't do it, okay? All right, so all of these brands have a very strong social circle with different groups. And the idea is that your brand is part of cultural conversations. You're part of the conversation, right? The second driver is self, which is to suggest your brand has a very strong emotional connection with consumers. And self was the number 2 financial driver in the study. So let's take a look at the coffee economy. Per capita consumption in the US, flat. Market cap of coffee increases by 8x because consumers go from paying 50 cents for a coffee to $4 for a coffee based on the emotional connection they have to Starbucks or Dunkin' or whatever brand they have an emotional connection to. They're willing to pay a modest premium or, I happen to think, a very large premium for that coffee experience. So self is a big driver, and all of these brands have a big sense of self. In fact, think about Red Bull for a minute. Red Bull started not as a beverage company, but a content company that happened to sell beverage products. As a result of that different approach to how they think about their business, they're able to build a very strong emotional connection to people who happen to use their products. And when new products came along, users didn't switch. When somebody else offered a price discount, users didn't switch because they had an emotional connection to that brand. Innovative. I hinted that innovative was wildly important, and it is. That daughter of mine, had I known, she lives in San Francisco, had I known she would pay someone to do chores for her, I could have been ahead of TaskRabbit and extracted revenue before she moved out to San Francisco, right? Because it's a marketplace between buyers and sellers, people who want to do small projects and people who want to pay someone to do small projects. But all of these brands are innovating and winning. In fact, if you've read anything about golf, everyone says millennials hate golf. Nothing could be further from the truth. Has anyone been to Topgolf yet in this room? I see a few hands. Topgolf runs a $10 million bar around a golf experience that prints money. They line up out the door, right? So it's not that everyone hated golf, it's that their definition of golf was reimagined through the lens of what this consumer expected. And that reimagine is important. So innovation is constantly being willing to make changes in favor of consumers, being more useful, simplifying their lives. And if you're simplifying your lives, you're going to win. Trust has been on lists forever, and it's very hard to compete and win on trust, but it absolutely showed up in the research. The challenge is you have to be able to be remarkably consistent. Google's one of the most trusted brands on the planet. FedEx built their entire business on trust. If you've flown Southwest Airlines recently, they've eroded trust with consumers through a variety of mishaps that have occurred, from their entire system going down, causing them to delay all their flights, to all kinds of other things. So you give it up very quickly and you earn it very slowly, but it is an important measure. Fourth is purposeful. All of these brands create a strong sense of purpose. Before Tom's Shoes was acquired, the private equity company that Bain Capital contacted us and said, what do you think of Tom's Shoes? We said, well, when it comes to purpose, probably the strongest brand on the planet. But if they're going to grow, they're going to have to also win by also creating a more unique brand with a broader portfolio. So again, you can be very strong on one measure. You have to think very broadly about how you do this. Your employees are looking for purpose too. Remember, consumers and employees in today's age, very fine line. And AT&T, how many of you have hated on AT&T at some point in your past? I see one brave soul over here. Okay, well, AT&T, public company that spends $1 billion a year in marketing, spends less than $10 million a year in a campaign called Don't Text and Drive. I was curious about this campaign because I'm a cyclist and I got hit. I was riding in the bike lane, I got hit by an ER surgeon who was texting and driving. Yes, I know it sounds unbelievable, but it happened, so it's not. And I know none of you would text and drive, so I decided to call some executives at AT&T. I said, tell me about the program. They said, well, it's interesting. We spend a very small amount of our budget on it, less than 1/10 of 1%, if you looked at the public data, right? And yet consumers give us more credit and love as a brand for Don't Text and Drive than everything else combined. When's the last time you saw an ad for AT&T, and can you remember how many gigabytes you're getting and what the price point was? The reality is it's a sea of noise, and I forget that. So purpose becomes a differentiator. Dove reinvented an entire category based on purpose. Finally, accessible. Amazon is a brand that wins on accessibility, which is being hyper-convenient. Accessibility is defined as being hyper-convenient. Interesting, if you look at Victor's slide from before, you would see Netflix, Uber, and Amazon on that slide. He was showing you a slide, and all of the brands Victor was showing you, I would argue, are network operator models, which is to suggest the power of having lots of consumers in the network is a part of the equation that drives value to other consumers. And Amazon has that in its favor. Amazon was the #1 brand in the study, tied with Apple across all generations. And if you're interested, you can download that report. It's called The Millennial Mindset. Same place, millennial marketing. Very fascinating, because I was shocked to see a brand like Amazon considered to be as strong as a brand like Apple and beat all the other brands in the study, including Uber. Okay? With that, those are the 6 mindsets. So 55% in this study was related to pricing and physical access types of measures. I could go through that list. 45% was your ability to drive these mindsets. The highest performing, highest profit brands do both, A and B. They work on both sides of the house. Okay, with that in mind, go ahead next, please. I'm having a little trouble. With that in mind, I'm going to move to share some tangible examples of how millennials are influencing other consumers, and take some of the main themes that are going on within millennial culture and share a little bit more. So the first is standing more than your bottom line. And that's sort of related to the purpose gene we discussed. And it's as important for millennial employees as it is for millennial consumers. And by the way, we live in a world with a lot of transparency. You can't fake it. You can't be really mean and cruel to the employees and vendors and communities you work with and then have millennial consumers not find out about this. It's not going to work. So standing for your more than your bottom line is a really big deal, which suggests that your brand behavior and the actions you take are going to trump brand positioning. I grew up in an era where I made money consulting in brand positioning, long before millennials were around, right? To thirsty, sweaty jocks, Gatorade was the original sports beverage that enhanced performance. You had a core user, a reference point, and a brand payoff. Many of you grew up in that era, and I'm suggesting it's not enough. If you want to have extraordinary financial performance, you're going to have to think about brand behavior in addition to brand positioning. So the era I see in the future is going to be around story living, which is to suggest the great brands aren't going to be merely able of telling the story, they're going to have to provide demonstrable proof that they're living their story every day. One of my favorite examples is Tesla. Why Tesla? Because Tesla took their IP, their intellectual property, and gave it away to the good faith use of their competitors. Literally made it free. Now, I don't know too many companies whose CEO holds a press conference and tweets out, "We're making our IP available." But that is proof to their brand fans, who are at the core of the social circle of Tesla, who actively curate content about that brand on the behalf of the brand at their time and expense, right? It goes all the way around. So as an example of that, Tesla, proof, positive. Second trend I want to talk about is adventure. Millennials love adventures. In fact, some of the studies I've seen come out, not our own studies, but other studies as well, show that adventure is one of the biggest themes, and it doesn't change when they have kids. The time they have to take the adventures decreases, but their desire for adventure doesn't change. And so what they're looking for is everything from new experiences to new products that will tap into that adventure theme. So that's a macro trend, and they're really looking for a sort of seamless experience. So they don't want to have hassles related to shipping, they don't want to have hassles related to picking it up or shopping or anything else. They want to be able to get all of that. Reality is they want to be able to share it. If I make a purchase I'm excited about, I want to share it. If I go to dinner tonight, we have an amazing sunset here in Florida, and I didn't put it on my Instagram account, did the dinner even exist? Of course not. That's millennial culture. So you have to think about creating ways for them to share their excitement about the purchases they're making, because they're your biggest advertising opportunity, is to have the existing consumer set advocate for your brand. So on this adventure theme, they're always collecting experiences, mud runs, skydiving, all kinds of things. That's what they want in life. They want a series of experiences, and that includes products as well as physical experiences. One of my favorite examples is for a beer company, European beer company, traditional beer company that said, we need to tap into that. Our consumer set demands experiences. So I'd like to share that example. So the adventure trend is a huge macro trend, and for many of you, it's something you can embrace either pre or post-purchase as a way to build acceleration, particularly among consumers who love your brand, who want to share more about the purchase they made with their friends, which again is crucial to driving volume. All right, the third is culture of content. Today's modern consumer can check you out. They can check me out. They can get information from the palm of their hand anytime before, during, and after a purchase. And they love to consume content in all kinds of forms. I think for the vast majority of people in this room, we could take your customer set at an individual customer level and correlate your most profitable customers with the customers who consume the most content on your category and topics adjacent to your category. And I think there would be very few outliers if we took all the data from all the $500 million of sales just in this room. So content becomes wildly important. Content is shareable. Even if consumers are not creating content about their purchase with you, they are certainly checking you out and consuming content. So with that in mind, I want you to think about content in this way, and I put a little more detail in the second book, Millennials with Kids, on the topic if you're interested. But you think about planned and unplanned and reactive and proactive. It's not the job of a 21-year-old in charge of your social media to do all this work. It's your job to think about the strategy and their job to execute the strategy. And so you need to have a view towards what you're going to do with every single quadrant. And that's going to be different for every business in the room because you do sell different things. But the reality is we know today's consumer is more likely to believe content than they are ads. Right? We know they're going to believe content more than they're likely to believe ads. So make sure you're thinking about your content. I'm not suggesting you have to create all your own content. For many of you, you could curate other people's content on topics interesting to your consumer, and that would be sufficient with a small dose of your own hyper-interesting content that's related to the product you sell. Again, different people in the room with different businesses, so I'm not trying to make a recommendation because each business is going to figure out where they fit in this spectrum, but don't delay and don't pass this off. The strategy has to be set by leadership. The execution can be done by someone who's more junior in the social space. Frictionless journey, a topic I'm going to talk about a little bit today, and we're going to talk more about tomorrow in the work session, okay? Frictionless journey. I hate friction. Today's modern consumer hates friction. The question is, are you taking friction out of every step of the process? Amazon's success in that massive study we did is directly related to their ability to beat other retailers in terms of friction removal. They're easier to use. So again, we live in this space where I'm an active prosumer. And if you think of your buyer more prosumer and less consumer, you're well down the road to having success, because they're going to be capable of being a lot more prosumer and a lot less consumer, right? Which is a very different view of the world in terms of a buyer. So in this path to purchase that we used to have, we used to think of a funnel. I don't like funnels because I don't think that's reality in today. I think it's a lot less linear. I think consumers explore, purchase, share, and then they kind of go through that process again, and that sharing part is crucial. The high-performing companies, again, find ways to tap into other consumers to share on their behalf, because those highly satisfied consumers, the consumers with a very high overall satisfaction, OSAT, if you will, are the ones who are advocating at their time and expense, and I believe them more than I believe the ad. In terms of examples of friction, for example, Marriott hired me several times last year to speak at corporate events, including to their leadership team, and I said, you know, it's interesting to me because every time I walk into a Marriott, I have to sign paperwork, and I have to show ID, and I have to do all these things, yet I have a mobile app on my phone. And if you only had a geofence around your property, which most good companies were thinking about geofencing circa 2011. Okay, if you had a geofence around your property and I had my mobile app on, you would actually save money and increase my user experience by meeting me at the door as a platinum member, handing my keys, and I could go on my way. You would reduce your cost of operation, you would take friction out of the process, and I would be better served. So why aren't they doing it? I don't know. But the reality is, it's that kind of stuff that makes people crazy, right? Like I dislocated my finger in Phoenix, and I flew home the next day, and I had it re-x-rayed in Kansas City. Thank God I had a board of directors meeting where I was making a presentation like this to Blue Cross Blue Shield, where I got to share the fact that nobody at Blue Cross Blue Shield has heard of the cloud, Really? You got to be kidding me. I had to go through the entire process a day later, re-x-ray the whole thing because you don't have a way to communicate what you took in Phoenix to what you have over here in Kansas City. So look at your business and dissect it. Put yourself through your process. If you haven't purchased goods from your own site and tried everything involved, including shipping and receiving your goods, do it. Because you will probably find ways to take friction out, and every time you take friction out, you're going to drive your profits up. Okay, fifth, peer affirmation. Today's modern consumer absolutely has a peer network, and that peer network is their expert network. I don't need the Kelley Blue Book to buy a car, and I don't need an expert in electronics from some third-party, company, Sony's paid endorser, to buy electronics from you. I have friends who can tell me what I need to know, and I tap into those networks. I don't have one friend, I have different friends on different topics. My friend who's an expert on travel and my friend who's an expert in cars are not the same friend. But I know how to find those friends and ask questions, and those friends are the ones who are affecting my purchase choices. So do you identify people within your data sets who are more socially active and who are experts on the topics? And do you cultivate relationships with that subset of customers who could be influencing other customers? Because peer networks and peer affirmation is part of millennial culture. Transparency is the next topic we accidentally breezed past, but transparency is wildly important. If you screw up, admit it. And frankly, many of the high-performing companies today have figured out how to capitalize on it, right? If you look at Domino's Pizza, what did they do? They relaunched their entire brand around the fact that we used to suck. Right? If you were to write the strategy for Domino's Pizza, what you would say, we used to suck. That would be the entire corporate strategy, and they relaunched the brand around the fact that we've improved and we've made good on that. So I want to share this example real quickly of how Arby's approached one of their errors.
Arby's has an agreement to feature their good friend Pepsi in 2 commercials a year. Well, Arby's messed up and forgot about the second commercial. So here it is. Pepsi, cool, refreshing, and goes great with Arby's sandwiches and other Arby's foods. Arby's, we have Pepsi.
I love that. I mean, it's like, wow, you couldn't have tacked that any better, right? And millennial employees love the same thing. There's nothing better than when I screw up and I walk into my team and I say, you know what, I goofed up, guys. I made the mistake I don't want you to make, and I own it. Because it's disarming, right? So think about when you screw up as an opportunity to turn things around, okay? I also, within transparency, I'm going to go back one if we can, please. Would encourage you to look at a brand called Everlane, an emerging brand. Their pricing model is intended to be transparent. So they show their cost of labor, cost of materials, cost of shipping as part of the strategy to disarm consumers about their pricing strategy. Again, Everlane is the example. It's a little hard to see here, but later on, if you want to check it out, feel free. Okay. So data. Victor talked a little bit about data, and I think it's very important to think about data in a couple ways. First, you collect a lot of data, right? You have data about people who purchase your goods and services. I think in Tomorrowland, when we find the companies that have extraordinary profits, they're going to marry social data to customer data. Why do I think that? Because I think there's some set of your customers who are not all alike. You might have 100 customers who look alike, who made the same purchase. But one of them, or 2 of them, or 10 of them might be very active in social media, might be big category users, might have a lot of influence. So I think Tomorrowland, companies like yours are going to start to take data on transactional information, marry that data to social information, and start to figure out, hey, within my customer set, if I find these 50 people who are wildly interested in my topic, who are going to curate content on my topic, and I nurture those relationships, I can really reimagine the power of building one-on-one relationships. I might not be able to do it with 10,000 people, but I could certainly do it with 100 or 150. So now that football season is over for me, as you know, baseball season's around the corner. And so I wanted to share this example of reimagining data from a movie many of you might have seen.
We're trying to solve the problem here. I guess you're not even looking at the problem. We're very aware of the problem. Okay, good. What's the problem? Look, Billy, we all understand what the problem is. We have to replace. What's the problem? The problem is we have to replace 3 key players in our lineup. What's the problem?
Same as it's ever been. We've got to replace the same what we have existed.
No, what's the problem, Eric?
We need 38 home runs, 120 RBIs, and 47 doubles for the club.
The problem we're trying to solve is that there are rich teams and there are poor teams. Then there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's us. It's an unfair game. And now we've been gutted. Organ donors for the rich. Boston's taking our kidneys. Yankees taking our heart. And you guys are sitting around talking the same old good body nonsense like we're selling jeans. Like we're looking for Fabio. Big difference. We are the last dog at the bowl. You see what happens to the run to the litter? He dies.
Billy, that's a very touching story, and I think we're all very much aware of what we're facing here. You have a lot of experience and wisdom in this room. Now, you need to have a little bit of faith and let us do the job of replacing Giambi.
Is there another first baseman like Giambi?
No, not really.
No?
And if there was, can we afford it? Then what the fuck are you talking about, man? If we try to play like the Yankees in here, we will lose to the Yankees out there.
Well, that sounded like fortune cookie wisdom to me, Billy.
No, that's just logic.
Who's Fabio?
Yeah.
So as you think about being the smartest seller in the room, I want you to think about how you use your data to create more personalized, more customized experiences, how you use your data and your existing customers to create evangelists who are going to also recruit new customers. Your goal isn't, my problem is today I have to just drive sales. That's an outcome that you want to have happen. I feel like I sat in that exact meeting twice last week with people around that table having that same discussion. It made me nuts. And so as you look at this, keep asking, is that the real problem I'm addressing? And are we fully leveraging the data we have to be the smartest seller? Because I think that's going to be hugely important to consumers. Consumers are happy, according to our research, to share data with you. What they're unhappy with is when they share the data and you don't use it. And you don't use it to create a better experience for me. So if you ask, use it. Make sure you do. Okay. The eighth is hacking. There's an entire culture of hacking. Do not attempt to recruit this guy to your team. He's on mine. He's an amazing hacker, right? He's finding the inefficiencies that you can obviously see in his life and solving them himself. But many of the companies that grew out of nowhere today have done exactly that. I used to always either get a taxi or, frankly, a driver. I would pay for a driver. But Uber is more reliable than my driver. Even if I get off the plane at JFK, the odds that Uber will come faster than my driver are very high. So it's not just a pricing issue. So I want you to understand that most of the big winners in today's marketplace, the brands that Victor showed you, the network operator model, are also hacking common pain points. If we could go back one, please. The challenge is to think about innovation in two buckets, if you will. You have sustaining innovation and disruptive innovation. So sustaining innovation might account for 90% of how you're going to spend your time and money. You're going to look at core and emerging opportunities. But disruptive innovation is that term you've probably heard, blue ocean innovation. And I want you to spend some percent of your time, whether it's 2% or 10%, it's up to you, on blue ocean strategies. Don't let someone else be the person to invent the idea or solve the problem that's right in front of you, that you would have seen had you put yourself through your entire sales process, had you had your order shipped to you just the way it was shipped to your customers, right? So core and emerging opportunities fall in the sustaining bucket. I'm fine with stage gate rapid innovation models that look at traditional ROI metrics for sustaining. For disruptive innovation, or blue ocean, if you prefer the term blue ocean innovation, I have two and only two things I want you to write down. And I say write down because they're not in the book. And that is this idea consistent with our brand? And second, can we afford to make the bet? Because the reality is most of the big innovations have come through rapid prototyping ideas, and they're not being done by the billion-dollar companies that have the largest market share today. They're done by entrepreneurs just like you who say, I'm going to pursue that idea. I can see that pain point, and I'm going to solve for that pain point. And the only thing I'm encouraging you not to do is make a 0% bet on blue ocean. Even if you're only making a 2% bet, I'm fine. Again, the two questions are, is this idea consistent with the brand authority we have? And can we afford to make the bet? There are no reason why companies like Dollar Shave Club come out of nowhere and kill the gorilla, other than the fact that they were afraid to make the bet. I promise you would find deck after deck in Boston in GE's offices, right? Or whoever owns Dollar Shave Club now, that had the research done by companies just like mine that rapid prototype those ideas 4 or 5 years probably before they ever came to market. So as entrepreneurs, this is a big opportunity for you if you see those pain points to solve for them. The fastest way to see the pain point is empathy. To understand the emotional pain I feel, right? And when I talk about emotional pain, that means there's a lot of friction, I'm pissed, I'm tired of it, and I'm not going to take it anymore. The golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. I want you to unlearn that rule and reimagine a new rule. The new rule is treat others the way they want to be treated, right? Don't assume you and I want to be treated the same way any more than your customers do. To understand their needs and meet their needs precisely will allow you to build a very large business. If we could go to the next, thanks. Finally, the new selling model. I'd like to talk about the new selling model. Next slide, please. So how many of you learned always be closing? I see a few hands. ABC, right? Like your boss would say, ABC, always be closing, ABC, ABC, ABC. And I think when I think about millennial culture, I think about always be collaborating, always be helping. Right? If you can always be helping, they will prefer your brand. Helping could be giving me just-in-time content that goes with just-in-time products. I don't know that I know all the wonderful uses for the products you sell. I met a woman today who sells cookie cutters. Okay, well, inspire me with all kinds of content to use your cookie cutters. Or someone who sells electronics. And if you have a really big customer, and I have a couple, I think about going way above and beyond. How many of you use email all the time? Most of you probably have email addresses on customers. How many of you make a little selfie video when you have a really big customer who can't solve a problem? Send them the selfie video, one-on-one, right? Like, I have content on the Millennial Mindset if someone calls and asks about the Millennial Mindset. If I have a customer with a really complex problem and I know that an email isn't going to solve it, I can do a really quick video and I don't need to hire a video team. I've got this little device in my hand and I can send it to them right by email. That kind of personalization and customization is always be helping. You want to weaponize your ideas. You want to have content like the Millennial Mindset in your business. It's going to be different that goes along with the products you have. But reimagine the always be closing, because that is not what today's consumer wants. Before, a salesperson was educator and gatekeeper. That was the role they had. In Tomorrowland, they're going to be trusted advisor. And a trusted advisor looks very different. A trusted advisor knows the industry trends, they address consumer needs, they're really transparent, and they're focused on expertise. And if your business is doing that, adjacent to the topics that are important to the consumers buying your goods, I promise you're on the right track. And if you're not doing that, you're going to have to think about the importance of it, because someone else is going to do it. Someone else is going to realize this is my path. My marketing budget is going into these kinds of things, because I know they create advantage. Finally, I want to talk about the Amazon effect. So I was a little surprised in our study about how powerful Amazon was. I guess you would probably not have been surprised given your business model, but I was, because I was expecting Apple and these other brands to just pretty much pounce in terms of consumer effect. So Amazon started 20 years ago. Just over 20 years ago, it was the Earth's biggest bookstore, and a lot has changed in 20 years. I got to tell you, I've got a board of directors meeting coming up for Tickets for Less, and I'm not excited, because in my gut, I don't have any information, but I think Amazon's going to probably go buy someone like Vivid Seats. And that's not going to be so good for people like me who own a ticket reselling business, right? Because they're going to be very disruptive. I think they're going to continue to create opportunities for you. I also think that the companies Victor showed you at some point are going to have to smell the coffee and start to react, right? Because that kind of growth will get noticed. So I think there's a lot of change in the future. And the landscape's going to change as consumer companies start to understand Amazon's secret, which is being wildly good at one thing: simplifying people's lives. Each of you has an opportunity to simplify the life of a customer, and if you're doing that, you're consistent with the Amazon brand. That is what Amazon does really, really well. They make it easier. That's what the data said to me, at least, when I read it. If we go to the next slide, please. So the other thing that's occurring with Amazon is They're creating a set of brands. So consumers don't have one brand they go to, they have 2 or 3. There are 2 or 3 places I would be willing to go for lunch today. There are 2 or 3 rental car companies I would consider. There are 2 or 3 of anything that are in my set. So Amazon is creating a notion, not that brand doesn't matter, brand matters a lot, but there are 2 or 3 viable alternatives, and if you're in the 2 or 3 set, you're gonna get consideration, and then it's gonna be about other factors ranging from the things we discussed, from pricing to purpose. So in Tomorrowland, you need to be in the 2 or 3. It's not about being the only brand, but being one of the 2 or 3 that offers conclusive proof of your success. Next slide, please. And then finally, being wildly available. Exactly when I need you, with content that inspires me, informs me, engages me. Amazon's brand success in the data we looked at is being really, really good at this. Not just as good as their competitors, better than their competitors. So with that in mind, next slide, please. I have 4 questions I'd love to encourage you to take with you. If you can answer all 4 of these questions, my instincts are you're going to have a wildly profitable future. Question 1, how are you going to create uniqueness? I started the conversation talking about Young Mi Moon at Harvard Business School. The fact of the matter is, the more unique your service experience is, the more unique your product set is, the more pricing authority you have. Second question, will you co-create meaningfulness? I said this was as important for your employees as it is for consumers, and there's a fine line because of transparency between A and B. You can't win with one group without winning with the other. You're not going to piss off all your employees and win with millennial consumers. Meaningfulness is a proxy for sales volume potential. The most successful brands are also focused on this second factor. Third, do you have an innovation plan? And if you have an innovation plan, are you separating some of your blue ocean ideas from your core and emerging opportunities? And you should be doing both. I'm not trying to give you a percentage, like you should spend 4% on X and 96% Y. I'm only encouraging you to think about these things through different lenses and not use the same financial criteria on the entire portfolio of innovation, because then you're going to fail. And then fourth, are you going to shift your focus from always be closing to always be helping? Because consumers prefer brands that are helping. And if you're helping, you're going to get the love from that buyer who's going to curate information about your products and services to their friend networks. And the most successful brands have really strong friend networks. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here, for getting the time to share this. And with that, I'd love to take a couple questions before we go to break if we have time. Thank you. If you raise your hand, I'll repeat the question. And I cannot see. And if there are no hands, we'll go to break. Yes, sir.
How do you see Jet comparing to Amazon? The slides that were shown initially showed Jet all the way on the bottom and Amazon all the way at the top.
So the question was, how do I see Jet comparing to Amazon? And Amazon was at the very top and Jet was at the very bottom. I'm an expert in consumer trends, not in Amazon or Jet, so I don't have a strong point of view about that question. Wouldn't want to try to tackle it because it's not my focus. My focus is really on the trends I shared. But if Jet is able to be more accessible and available than Amazon, then they'll disrupt Amazon. I think Amazon's pretty smart about trying to simplify people's lives, and they're going to continually hack and continually simplify. But if they fail, then other companies will emerge and start to, take steam. It's a good question. It's just not one I'm focused on. Yes, sir.
Yeah, with regards to Amazon opening up more stores, how will that impact, I guess, the trend like, with that data versus, being sold into the stores in the future and what's going to be happening now?
Okay, the question, I think I'm going to repeat it, and you can tell me if I got it right. With regard to Amazon's opening stores, how will opening stores affect, A, their ability to capture data, and B, how available and easy to use they are? Is that close? That's close, okay. I think opening stores, to me, makes some sense because the strategy is about being wildly useful. And if you're going to be wildly useful, you're going to need some kind of a distribution system for some of the products you sell. Might not apply to all categories. Now, whether you do that with your own stores, whether you do that through licensing agreements or otherwise, I don't know that it matters, but Amazon has obviously wanted to control its brand and values its brand in terms of their historic decisions. So to me, I see that as a natural outgrowth. I don't see it as a change in strategy. I don't think they're going to focus on traditional retailing. I see it as a way to drive home a strategy. And in the slides I showed you, I did show you that consumers want that seamless experience, right? So I think that's just a natural, smart process. But my instinct is their core will remain focused on online, and that's just a way to serve the online customer. Did I fully address? Great, thank you. Other questions? Yes, I'll come back over there in a minute. In the middle there, sir.
Yeah, I agree
Okay, I'm not that smart. I'll try to get one at a time. Go ahead.
You said you pull a lot of data, right, to get this information. Did you go to Facebook for any of that data?
No, the study is a fairly complex study. We asked 3,000 consumers a whole battery of questions, and we separated out how their attitudes from how they spend their money. So we didn't use data like Facebook data or other data like that. We do have access to that kind of data through other subscriptions we have, but we were really trying to understand the difference between stated importance and derived importance. Stated being, I said I was going to go to the gym this morning, derived being I actually spent time and money to belong to a gym and go.
Yeah. And then next, do you foresee Facebook being a problem for Amazon in the future, as Facebook has been talking about having their own marketplace?
The second question is, do I foresee Facebook being a problem for Amazon in the future? I think Facebook is a wildly powerful brand, okay? But I think at the core, Facebook's more likely to compete with what I'll call traditional media companies than traditional marketplace companies. They do have a network operator model, much like Airbnb. So if you Google search network operator models, you'll see some interesting data on that. Having said that, I think their focus is more on generating ad revenue. So I would never dismiss a brand like Facebook any more than I would dismiss a brand like Amazon, but I don't think they have the same strategy. So, I don't know if I fully addressed your question. I don't think they're pointed in that direction as their number one thing today. Yes, sir. And then I saw someone over here, and I'll come back.
What do you see as the future of traditional brick and mortar retail?
So the question was, what do I see as the future of traditional brick and mortar retail? If my thing was dialed in perfectly, I'd be trading online right now, right? I'd buy X and sell Y. I do think there are a segment of consumers who grew up shopping in brick and mortar stores who will shop brick and mortar. But the easier it is to use Amazon or other marketplaces, the less friction, the less cost of shipping, then as that comes down, the only barrier becomes one of being able to return the goods easily, right? The only barrier becomes that. And for me, there are certain purchases where I want to be able to try the pants on, try the shirt on, where it's a little easier as opposed to I'm buying this piece of electronics or I'm buying this item over here where I don't feel like I have a big need. But having said that, I still buy my tennis shoes online because I know what size I need, right? So I think as the friction gets down to very low, it becomes harder and harder, which will cause companies like Walmart and Target to focus intently. When we published our new report on Gen Z just a couple days ago, Gen Z being teenagers, okay? Some of the first companies to come in and download the report for free were from Walmart and Target. So I definitely think, as you think about the future of retailing, that there will be more and more competition online as more and more volume is online. That's a good thing and a bad thing, right? But more and more of the volume online means more and more opportunity, right? I know there were a couple hands over here, but there was someone over. Yes, sir.
So, with regards to specific listings on Amazon, we are restricted with the type of content we can put up there. But what would you suggest if we wanted to target millennials? We provide as far as rich content or content altogether on our listings.
Okay, so the question was around restrictions Amazon places related to content you can share adjacent to your products and services. So again, I'm not an expert in your business specifically, and we could have a coffee and chat about it, but I would think about everything. So do you ship your goods and services in some kind of a package? Okay, so do you have an email address of the buyer? No. Okay, so in the package, I might say, here's some of the most commonly asked issues. Here's a video on the 5 most commonly, issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, issue 4, and feel free to grab these videos. By the way, feel free to email us for additional content that we will provide you that will inspire your usage of this new product. We want to make sure you fully use the product. I would think about how I look at the process before purchase, during the purchase, and after. And you're telling me they've tried to restrict you during the purchase. So my natural instinct, again, not knowing all the nuances of that, is to think about what I can do before and what I can do after. Which is part of why I would staple myself to the order. If I would order, if I were you, your goods from you and see how the whole process unfolds. When it comes to you, does it come as expected? And what would you as that buyer expect? And can you create a relationship after the fact if you're restricted during the fact? Because I got to tell you, as soon as I finally get that item, I finally have that new phone, the new TV, the new whatever, I want someone to inspire me on all the use cases, whether it's electronics or how to use an item to cook new dishes. Finally got the crock pot, here's all these ideas I've got to use it, right? So I'm not trying to say it's only an electronics issue. It's an inspire the user issue. Maybe time for one more question. I don't know how we are on time. One last question. There were a couple hands over here. Yes.
If you're a 100% seller on Amazon, where do you go to get data on your customers, like where other things that they're buying, like a lot of the data you're talking about?
If I'm a 100% seller on Amazon, where do I go? I don't have my own website. I don't know enough, again, about your business, but I would want to get customer data. I can append social and behavioral data to customer data fairly easily. There are lots of ways to append data. So my instinct would be, again, to work around. Much like his question was, like, what do you do if I'm restricted on content? I would want to try to work around. You know, I'd like to be able to offer you X as a buyer after the sale. If you could give me a little bit of information, then I would take that information and I would append data. And appending data is a useful way. And you know all the data you're appending is among buyers. So that would be a workaround that would be fast and efficient. But I'd probably pull someone in with knowledge about your specific thing and say, what kind of data is available? There's a ton of data available just about any topic you want. And it's usually pretty easy to append data to an email address or a physical send address if you have that. If you have neither of those, then I would induce someone to provide that in exchange for some benefit in order to be able to do it. And even if you only do 10% of your buyers, you still would have a file that would be statistically big enough to project out. So because you have lots of buyers, I append the data to a small percentage, I can project out what the buyer profile looks like. Does that help? Okay, thank you again, I appreciate it.